Josh, just a little bit. We're good? All right, perfect. So we will get the meeting going, so call to order, and we'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we have roll call, please?
Mazik,
Yes, here.
Curtin,
Here.
Mattson,
Here.
Mitchell,
Here.
Ruth, McCanny.
He's gonna be late. He did make a call, so he is coming.
And Fletcher.
Didn't hear from her.
So we need a motion.
I'll make a motion to excuse Mr. Ruth for his previous engagement and the tardy for Mr. McCann, who's on his way.
Second.
All opposed, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
You said all opposed.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry. Whoops. I leave today, I guess. All right, yeah.
It's different.
Okay, here, I'll rephrase.
All in favor.
All in favor, excuse me.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None.
You didn't include Kelly.
No, I did not. Okay, no. We got our laugh out for the evening, so.
Okay.
All right, so we have our agenda in front of us. Do we have any additions or anything that we'd like to update? Oh,
Here comes.
perfect.
Thank you.
Good evening. So we just did a roll call, and then we're just looking over the agenda to see if there was anything we wanted to add or anything like that, so.
Yeah.
So I'm good with the agenda as presented.
Motion to accept. As presented.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. All right, so now we are on to our first public comment. This is for items on the agenda only. We do have a public hearing for old business item 2. So please reserve your public comments for the public hearing there. So this would be on anything related to the master plan review update. We will have an additional public comment near the end of the meeting for any and all topics. The public will be provided 3 minutes for their public comment. If approved by us, you can be allotted an additional 3 minutes. Your time will begin after stating your name and address. And I believe, Josh, the microphone is linked up to the back there.
It's just right there. Those microphones aren't working right
Okay,
now.
so just keep in mind that if you
Speak up.
can, speak up a little bit so we can hear and the public can hear. So with that, I will open up public comment. Anyone for first public comment today? All right, hearing none, seeing none, we will move on to our public hearing. Public hearing, proposed code of ordinance amendment to chapter 32, zoning article 3, zoning district regulations, section 32104, schedule regulations, notes to schedule regulations. I will make the motion to enter the public hearing.
I'll support.
Motion and support, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. And that is 6:35 for the public hearing. All right, so now we are in public hearing for the proposed code of ordinance amendment. Anyone for public comment related to that? Hearing none, seeing none. I'll make the motion to exit public hearing.
Second.
Motion and support, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. So that brings us to approval of our May 7th, 2024 meeting minutes. Anything on there y'all had noticed, any additions, errors? Make a motion to approve the May 7th, 2024 meeting minutes as presented.
I'll support.
Motion and support. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So we have no communications. That brings us to our old business. First item, master plan review and update.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Because we don't have a podium, I was gonna stay over here so I could take notes, if that's all right, and just let me know if you can't hear me. So the main update that we have tonight is the comments that we received so far during the public comment period. This is the state required 63-day period before we go to adopt the master plan. So in the packets tonight were the comments that we had received up until last week, Tuesday. And then I believe Karen sent over the Oakland County comments that we received a couple days after. And so, you know, tonight there's no action needed. We're scheduling the public hearing, and you'll vote to adopt the master plan at the next meeting in July. But because the comment period ends 2 days from now, we wanted to give you everything we've received so far. See if there's any questions and anything outstanding that we might address in the draft before we bring it back for the public hearing. And so just a couple things to note. We have received official review letters from both Oakland County's Planning Department as well as the Oakland County Road Commission. And then in addition, we received a written comment from a resident, and those are the only comments we've received to date. And in the comments from the Road Commission, there were just a couple of minor corrections they wanted us to make. And we're happy to make those to the draft, and those will be all incorporated before next month. So what we'll do is after tonight, and if there's any questions, and then after June 6th, when the comment period officially closes, we'll make any necessary revisions, and we'll try to get you the plan a little bit earlier so that you have enough time if you'd like to review it one last time ahead of the public hearing next month. And so the Road Commission comments, like I said, were a couple of minor things, a couple of comments that they just wanted to align with the planning that they're doing on their end. So happy to answer any questions on that. And then the Oakland County Planning Department, we received their review letter as well, and the process that they go through, because at the county level, sometimes they will also have a planning commission, but Oakland County does not. And so just to make sure that municipal plans are sort of aligned with one another, they do a review to make sure that we are planning in a compatible way with our neighbors. And so sort of the short story on this review is that they found that our plan is compatible with all of the future land use plans of our neighbors, which is great. And they had a couple of comments of suggestions of things to add. I think that in their recommendations, these couple of things wouldn't be difficult to add, so we're happy to incorporate these comments. This includes, you know, the first comment, we just want to look through the recommendations on that review. They mentioned changing the future land use category for the Holly Oaks ORV park to recreation, so we're happy to do that. I think that aligns better with the use of that location. And then number 2, incorporate information related to the Western Oakland Transportation Authority, which has recently begun servicing Holly Township. Again, that would be a simple thing for us to add, to note that this is a new alternative transportation option available in the township. Number 3 suggests incorporating a hazard mitigation plan. So Karen actually sent me a resolution that the township board adopted back in March. So they've adopted the countywide hazard mitigation plan, and we find that that's sufficient for the township at this time. And the county said that meets their recommendation as well. I sent an email and let them know that we've adopted the countywide plan, and they said that's great. So we kind of have met that note of theirs. And then number 4, expand on the community's development opportunities by including brownfield redevelopment. Brownfield redevelopment is a tool that is used when there is contamination on a site. You can get additional funding for development if you want to clean up the site, basically. You can get funding from state and federal government. I'm assuming that it has not been mentioned in Holly because you don't have really many or any contaminated sites, but they've recently revised the law that governs that funding to include what they consider obsolete properties, so properties that might not be usable in their current form, but you can get funding to turn them into something else. And so we can add a note about that. It would not be difficult to do that, and just could indicate to folks that are looking at Holly's plan and future planning commissions, staff, residents, anyone that might be interested, that this is an opportunity and that it might benefit the township. And then these last couple of items, so they noted updating a couple of things that we included, including the county's emerging sectors. This is something they do for economic development, looking at innovative emerging sectors. We mentioned it in the plan, but they've got an updated version, so I'm happy to make that update and make sure it's all the most recent version of their strategy. And then similarly, the Michigan Natural Resources, or the Natural Features Inventory, they said that this is a map that we include in our plan. They've got a more recent version, so that will be also a quick change. And then the last 2, so this first one, number 7, says, consider incorporating information related to the Oakland County Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area. So as time has gone on, planning as a field and planners, landscape architects, environmentalists have noticed and started to put a stronger focus on trying to cut down on invasive species that sort of destroy our native plants and can become a nuisance. So if that's something that you all find, to be consistent with our values, we're happy to add a note about that one. And then the last one is establish or join a local waste resource management program for household hazardous waste. So this again is getting at wanting to make sure that we are preserving our natural environment, which we know is a strong value here in Holly. And I noticed a couple of typos in this review. They mentioned a different township in one of them, and then in this note they mentioned the village. So I guess one thing that I'd want to do is make sure that there isn't already someone in the township addressing this issue, but if you find that, wanting to make sure that there's a waste management program in the township for hazardous materials specifically, that's something that we could add to the goals. And so I don't think that there's anything in here that is sort of not aligned with Holly's overall goals and objectives, and I'm happy to answer any questions about all of these. And if you are in support of these comments, we are happy to add them to the plan. And like I said, we can bring back the final draft for adoption. And my goal is to give you at least 2 weeks to review that, if not longer, depending on if we get any more comments in the next 2 days. And that goes for the public as well. Anyone's welcome to submit. And yeah, happy to answer any questions.
I thought Oakland County had some good comments, and a lot of them, I think, do relate to like the environmental piece, and obviously that's one of our main focuses of
Yeah, hazardous
what
waste
we're
collection
dealing
has been very popular in other areas, and then we haven't
Yeah, I
done
think
for
it's
Howard, so
fabulous
I'm
idea.
not sure. I assume it takes effort is the problem.
A lot of, very expensive. We've addressed it several times,
Yeah.
but we haven't lately, so it's something we should probably
Should be a goal,
do.
even if we don't have to
Yeah.
recognize somebody.
I remember we bought our house, and the previous owners had left like 20 paint cans, and like we just haven't done anything with them because I don't want to just throw them away, but I don't know where to properly dispose of it, so it's just taking up space that I want it to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I think these are all good recommendations.
Yes.
And also, same from the road commission, I was pretty impressed out of like 140-page master plan that they only came up with like 5 or 6 things that were pretty minor, so, it was more or less, little corrections, check out the website for this information, so whatever, so, I think the Oakland County summarization was pretty nice of kind of, someone that wants to get an idea of what our master plan is aiming for without reading the entire thing. I thought it was it was put together beautifully, and I thought it was cool how they broke down all the neighboring communities and kind of their summarization of the dwellings per acres and things like that. Like, I was pretty proud to see that a lot of our land is being left at the 1 unit per 10-acre dwellings, and even rows. I mean, you would think Groveland rows, they would be very similar, and some of those were at, one acre or whatnot, neighborhood, yeah, so, I'm pretty happy with the efforts for the preservation that we're trying to do as best we can, so. Anyone with any other thoughts or comments?
As you say, it's good issues they brought up and thorough.
And the last thing that I'll mention about Oakland County is that tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m., what they do with this review is they send it to another committee, which is, let's see, it is called, I believe it's on the front of this review. So it will go before what's called the Oakland County Coordinating Zoning Committee tomorrow morning. And basically this is just a committee to see and make sure that the neighboring boundaries have sort of compatible land uses like I mentioned. And this is more or less a formality because they didn't find any issues. They find that it's compatible. And I'll be attending that meeting virtually on behalf of the township if they have any questions. And, if there's anything that you wanted to relate to the county, I'm happy to mention that.
So I did have some questions and comments from the survey comment, or it's not the survey, I'm sorry, the public comment, keep calling it survey, it's not survey. But in large, it talks of the frustration and concerns with the current Riverside project and what was left. So this may be a question for like the trustees, but what options do we have to keep the developer accountable for the development, getting it cleaned up, having the things done, say, because I don't live in that community, I live in the neighboring one, and have walked my dogs and driven through, and these comments, they're not wrong. Like, there have been trash or debris and stuff, like,
It's interesting, because Silverman basically was saying that it wasn't their responsibility because they sold it to somebody else, but not being complete kind of reflects on them. But yeah, it's interesting, it's a good, and that's to be a common, you know, there's several comments around that.
Because I can understand I mean, the bulk of these are, we don't want too much development, we don't want overdevelopment. It certainly doesn't help when the developer, the people that are there, doesn't finish the job or follow through or leaves trash. I mean, so it may not be able to be answered here, but that's just a question of mine, or could have, or we look for information. Like what options do we have? I know obviously they have a deposit and stuff like that. How much can we ask for that, like legally? You know, like I just want to make sure that we protect our citizens through this whole process.
Yeah.
I agree. I think reading through this, I think that basically has been the whole center on this, is that area and the development. And I think it needs to be clarified a little bit with, because the first developer, and then they sold, and actually who owns it now, whose responsibility is it? I don't think that's real clear, and I think that does get a little bit confusing to people.
Welcome.
Sorry. Been to all the other buildings, I found you guys. We're gonna burn down this building this weekend, why would we be here?
So, Mike, just to get you caught up.
Sorry.
We went through the minutes. The public hearing did not have anyone speak to it from the public. There was no public comment.
Okay.
We approved May's minutes. We didn't have communications. And so now we're going through the public comments for the master plan. And we had just discussed the Oakland County comments as well. So anything, you just got in, so get settled in, but before we move on, if there's anything with the Oakland County stuff, cool. So we felt pretty good, especially about all their recommendations, but especially the last one with like the hazardous waste. Seemed like a pretty cool thing to try to work on.
Yes.
So just to kind of get you up to speed, so.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I had raised the question, a lot of the comments in the public comment period was around the frustration with the development and developer of Riverside, you know, that things weren't completed. There was scraps from the work and the sidewalks just got done and they tore up the sod and stuff even recently, and I get it's probably part of the job, but like what's the fix for that? So my question was like, what options do we have to hold the developers accountable to, you know, the work that they're doing, was where we're at now. So I do agree with a lot of the comments. Maintaining the green space and less development is the overarching theme, and what we're aiming to do, and why we're picking and choosing dwellings for, you know, the space in that whole area. I thought there was an interesting question. Will Holly require the developer to prepay all the water and sewer taps, or will they let them deal with it to the residents? So I thought that was a really interesting question. I wouldn't want that on the residents if we don't have to.
That was an issue with the prior Silverman development. They let them develop a lot without paying that prior, and I don't know the whole thing, but they had, what do you call it, on the property, so you couldn't build a home without doing it. But normally they have to do the whole pay it ahead of time, and they didn't make them do that. And that's one of the reasons the village water and sewer rates are so high, is that it wasn't paid ahead of time. And in the downturn in the economy, they didn't build for a long time, so.
Now it's all built, you know, tapping fees and
You'd
water
think it
would
would
go down.
You know, it did go down.
Yeah. I bought the argument at first,
Yeah.
now that it's all built, I still want to have this something.
But I don't think they ever collected all the money from Silverman that was promised either. That there was lawsuits involved. I'm not sure how they came out. The last I saw that they were still.
Well, I'm not an expert on the whole thing, but yeah, the tapping fees were individual on each lot.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that wasn't normal.
Which were really
that was,
expensive.
yeah. Yeah, and the ones that are developing now or developed later did have to pay these, but it was much, much later than they expected to collect them. I guess that's it.
I'm not an expert.
I think that's what happened. It's happening.
Yeah, that didn't be.
Yeah, the village has to do with that more, but
But yeah.
create a lot of
The
village.
the tap and fees were a big deal. You are correct.
The village residents are still not happy with their water and sewer rates because of that.
Yeah.
And it was Solzman properties that were involved in that, so. They did want to talk about their history, but there's quite a bit of history involved.
So again, reading through, I mean, one of the biggest things is mentioned over and over is rural. So for me to look at this, I'm sure for the rest of the planning commission here too, is this is basically a town center area where, you know, how do you, I don't know if it's a question of when you say rural, a lot of green space and keeping it open, so much as the question is how much more development can we allow in there to be able to meet the roads and the infrastructure? How do we manage that without taking away rights of some of the developer that have rights in there right now? So, so, you know, I think that's more of a question for us is how much is needed there? How do we still, you know, keep that within control without infringing upon the neighbors that live around it, being able to have access between your roads and your infrastructure. So that's, I think, the biggest question in that area. As far as rural for the rest of the township, yes, when we've done sending zones and receiving zones and you're keeping more your outlining areas to still be rural, larger lots, more countryside, you know, and this kind of thing. But, you know, when you're looking at one little area, or even an area, if you're talking about an area that will develop up by Dixie or whatever, what do we allow and how much in that area?
Yeah, so if I could speak to the first question about holding the developer accountable and things like that, I also noticed that comment, and one thing that I'd like to explore in the future with the township is in other communities, they will have the developer put a bond in, basically, so there could be a landscape bond, and what happens is so in Lyon Township, this is another one of our client communities that has had similar issues, and what will happen is we will do an estimate based on how much the landscaping that they are proposing will cost, and this is landscaping that is required by the zoning ordinance. And then they will put that amount in as a bond, and the township will hold that until we go in. After everything's been planted and constructed, we'll do a landscape inspection, and if there are dead plants or plants that are missing, we say, you didn't pass the inspection, you have to replace these plants or trees. And we hold that bond until they fulfill the landscape plans that were approved by the planning commission and the township board. And you know, these bonds can be tens of thousands of dollars, you know, so they want to make sure that they fulfill that. And that is one tool that, you know, in Lyon they have a bond for landscaping, sidewalks, a couple of other items that are escaping me, but you know, there are ways that the township can protect itself and its residents from the issues that you've experienced in the past. I do need to explore, you know, the existing neighborhoods that have issues. I think, you know, that's kind of a different case that we'd have to look into, but of course, that's a very valid concern. You don't want to have incomplete sidewalks. They're not, you know, completing or fulfilling the plans that were approved. And so there are tools that are available, and these are typically enacted through the zoning ordinance. And so in the Lyon Township zoning ordinance, they have a list of things that they collect bonds for. And so, you know, as we complete the master plan process, one of the biggest kind of next steps after you do a master plan or a master plan update is to look at, well, here's our vision, how are we going to bring that to life? And the biggest way is through the zoning ordinance, and to make the ordinance align with the plan, we'll have to make some updates to that, and we've talked about, what that might look like. And we're working with the township on a work plan to think about how we might go through a zoning update, because that's another kind of set of a process. And so, also speaking to the, to Pam's note about the rural town and the density and things like that. If you'll remember back to, I think it was 2 or 3 meetings ago, we talked about the regulating plan.
Yes.
And so where we landed with the rural town center in the master plan is that the way that it's developed and, you know, the look of it, the number of homes or units that can go into a certain area will be determined by this regulating plan. And so that is one of the strongest tools in planning and zoning to be able to have a say in how that kind of rolls out. And, you know, that's included in what we would do with a zoning update. And so that's kind of the next step for the township as we continue working through these overarching development concerns. Is we've now completed our master plan as our guiding document, and now we can look at making some updates in other policies and documents. So, you know, it's not a quick process, all of these things. Planning and zoning is very incremental, and the change that you'll see happens over time, but, you know, construction and development of things also doesn't happen overnight, so we're, you know, we're doing what we can to address these issues, and, you know, happy to answer any further questions about that, but that's kind of where we landed on it, in the plan.
Need to speak for the township. I don't wanna leave you guys thinking we don't have those things in place, because we do. So we have collected bonds, we do have a developer's agreement, however, there is no timelines in those agreements, so we've struggled with that. And collecting on those bonds is a legal process, but we have bonds in place, however, they were from, you know, 2005. Yeah, so, we're getting really close to the end and managing that, so I just want you to know that.
Thank you.
Now, do you know if they are as specific as the ones she mentioned as far as we can get like a landscape, a
Yep.
sidewalk? Okay,
It's
cool.
all in the developer's agreement for everything, all improvements within the development.
Okay, very cool. So with the name of it's escaping me, you just mentioned it.
Concept.
No, so in the master plan, or even in the Oakland County one, they mentioned it, I feel very strongly like the transfer receiving units and the neighborhood residential need to be two units per acre, rather than 3 to 1. I feel very strongly about that. I'm gonna communicate that probably every meeting going over this. Now, let's say the master plan was approved with 3 to 1 because it doesn't get voted in. My thought on that, it gets voted in to stay as it is 3 to 1. If we get into the process afterwards where we're looking at the dwellings per acre in the area, and we decide it should be 2 to 1, like what, I guess, like what's the recourse for that? Is that like what's the name of it, I'm sorry?
The regulating plan?
Yes, the regulating plan, thank you. Like what's the standard for that in relation to the master plan? Because we have like these preliminary like dwellings per acre, but then I would think that the regulating plan, can it override that or get more detailed, or it can't be more space? Do you understand my question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think you're looking at this 3rd page where they've got the table with the units per acre.
Correct.
In the Oakland County.
Correct.
So they only included a couple of these. You'll see that the rural town center is not included in this table. And so the rural town center, the reason that it doesn't have a prescribed density is because that regulating plan is what will determine it. And that's only for the rural town centers. So for these other ones, you know, if there are still changes you wanna make, now is definitely the time. So, I think we didn't, you know, we were under the impression that this was all set and that we felt good about this. If the plan gets adopted as the draft is in it right now, the things that are in it right now, there is an amendment process that you can go through. So say, you know, between now and 5 years from now, but before the next update happens, you can amend the plan, but that is another separate process, right? So I would say that we have 2 days left in the public comment period, and then a couple of weeks before the next planning commission, which will have the public hearing to, you know, we're looking to adopt it. And so, you know, right now is the time to talk about any outstanding questions or comments, because at the next meeting, you know, we'll have noticed everyone, and the public hearing, that's kind of its, you know, own process of getting it on the agenda and everything like that. And so we want to make sure that we feel very solid about it at that next meeting.
Make the change.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. I thought I was in the last meeting. That was, that, at least for me, like, I'm one person. There's many here. It's not just the Ryan show. And I don't want it to be that. That's just, but yeah, I just think especially, I mean, we've had public come and talk about, and that's not related to just rural town, the rural town center area. I think that just applies to any of those neighborhood residential for me. Because in reality, like that 2 to 1 really becomes probably like a 0.25, 0.33 acre lot after you have like roadways and, you know, all those things that are put in there. So just that the whole idea when I believe it was talked about with kind of the spacing or whatnot, that we're looking at a lot that's a driveway with a separate garage in the back and like a little strip of grass because it's a 5,600 square foot lot or something. Like, I just don't think that aligns. Yeah, that's just not what I think. That me personally, I don't think that's what the public wants. I don't think that's representative of the township. So if we can, in the higher developed areas, at least get, you know, truly like a third of an acre parcel, I think that provides space for people to have an attached garage, yard, outbuilding, shed, whatever, and it's still indicative, a little bit closer. I mean, obviously, the comments here, everyone wants a lot of land, but we do have, there's prior things in place, we're working with it, and we're gonna do the best we can with that, but that's my personal opinion, for that area, so.
I'm sorry, 1/3 of an acre, you mentioned? 1/3 of an acre?
So it's currently the transfer development is 3 dwellings per acre for receiving zones, as it's set up in the draft. And so what I had mentioned was that it'd be 2 dwellings per acre rather than 3, is my comment.
Okay.
Yeah, so since we're having this conversation, I pulled up the future land use map, and this sort of yellow, because the district that we're talking about specifically is this neighborhood residential, and that's got the 3 units per acre under the transfer development rights option. And so just to get us on the same page, so this kind of light yellow, which is, we've got some up here in the north that is designated neighborhood residential, as well as sort of on either side of the village. And so, you know, the transfer development option, that would be something where a developer comes in and none of this has been put in place in the zoning ordinance yet. So as it is even right now, after we adopt the plan, they wouldn't really be able to do what this option provides until we make an update to the zoning ordinance. But the idea behind this whole transfer development rights is that they would purchase up in one of these areas where there's the red boundary. They would purchase development rights on a property there, which would essentially kind of preserve it in its current form and make it so that no one could come in and build a subdivision. You know, it would maintain rural and natural, and obviously that's what we're trying to go for here. And so that's in the sending, or the sending zone. So then in these yellow areas, what this is saying is that if they go through that whole process, they could develop at this higher density in any of the yellow areas. So, you know, the neighborhood residential, I'm just gonna pull up the sort of idea behind that district. So each of our future land use categories have what we call like an intent, you know, what are we trying to get at in this area? And for neighborhood residential, it says, this is a designation for a higher intensity of use than the previous two residential districts. So the other residential districts are the low density and the rural estate. So the neighborhood residential is a higher designation for a higher intensity use than the previous two, and this district surrounds the village and higher intensity areas, acting as a transition zone near sensitive natural features and protected areas. So the idea, I think, behind this area is to get a couple of places in the township where you might see a more modern subdivision built. But if you're looking at just someone, a developer coming in wanting to do something by right, which is, you know, less expensive because you don't have to go through all the kind of loopholes that the transfer of development rights program would require, you're still looking at one dwelling unit per acre. And then there's the cluster development option, which is another option through the zoning ordinance to allow a little bit more density, but there's additional requirements beyond just the permitted by right, and we've got that at 2 units per acre, so half-acre lots. If the transfer development, if the 1/3 acre lots still feel too small for these areas, I think something that we might consider is, you know, in the low density residential, which is the sort of less dense step away from this neighborhood residential. So those are all of the areas on the map that are in this bright green. So this kind of lime green here. So the density permitted by right standard development is 1 unit per 5 acres. And then the permitted by right in the neighborhood residential is 1 per 1 acre. You know, we could do something where it's 2 units per 1.5 acre. Like, we can really do whatever you all feel comfortable with. But I just wanted you all to kind of get us on the same page so we're understanding, like, the intent behind this is to create a buffer before you're getting into the village or before you're getting into up in the north, some of these more industrial areas, to provide sort of like a more graduated transition between, you've got all the rural areas, and then you've got a little bit more density, and then you've got a really high intensity in the red, which would be the rural town center. So what's everyone's thoughts? Because we want to make sure that we get this right before the public hearing next month.
How do the receiving zones work if they don't have sewer? I mean, you can't put a septic field in a house on a half-acre lot. And they can really, the only spot that has sewer is the Riverside development. Everything else is outside the village. So I don't understand how we can create these receiving zones
Mhm.
if we don't have infrastructure to go there.
Yeah,
I mean,
so.
what would they be buying a right to? I mean, buying a right to more development, but yet it's like,
Yeah, so, if they wanna go into this higher density option, they're gonna have to be willing to make those connections and pay for those connections. And you're right, if there's an area that there's no available connections, then it's just not gonna happen. But it's not that, they will be permitted to develop at that density without providing water and sewer. And if there is no available connection, then no one's gonna be able to do it, right?
that's why, I mean, I don't know why we're creating a receiving zone and all that, when really the only spot that has sewer and water is out there. Nowhere else has the agreement, and I mean, that would be a whole process to go through to make it so we have sewer and water anywhere else outside the village.
Mhm.
It's a 2040 plan, so it could happen in 10 years.
Well, it could, but still, I mean,
So that it's
it
what you're
would be a
planning
whole,
for.
a whole new chapter they gotta open when they started talking about that, so whatever we're doing here would just be, it would be a whole new thing happening.
If you're very large parcel,
It's
before
a
they go.
plan, it's a future plan.
I'm just thinking, if somebody came in and really was spend the money to do the sewer and water, I mean, whatever we're talking about, they would have a whole totally different concept, I would think. I'm just thinking it would, everything we're doing here would be basically a wasted effort.
Yep.
There's no half-acre lot's gonna be allowed, you can't get a septic system on a half-acre lot. So we're arguing over nothing, and you can't do it except in that Riverside development. That's the only place that has sewer and water. So we can argue over that, but the rest of it's like, it doesn't apply.
But at one point, did those areas not have sewer and water and someone developed?
Nothing in the township had sewer and water until they made this agreement with Riverside and made it so that has sewer, that's the agreement with the village.
But that's my point, it happened there, so why can't it happen elsewhere?
But it would be an entire new chapter. Anything we're talking about now, I mean, it'd get rewritten. You know, they might buy a parcel that's somewhere way up in the green spot and want to put their own sewer system in, but I mean, that would just be, I mean, arguing over getting it down to the small lots and all that stuff, really the only place it applies is where they have sewer and water. The rest of the township, really, hey, they're on their own.
Well, that's more or less, because the receiving zones are in the areas where they have it, so that's my,
Not the stuff all around the village, the only receiving zone that has sewer and water is Fish Lake Road.
It's on the property.
That's the only piece that has
They
sewer
got that
outside
years
the
ago.
village.
only the rural town center.
That's the only area that has sewer, goes to it outside the village. The village is their own system. They made that agreement during it with Silverman 20 years ago.
Yeah.
That's when they put in the new water tower, they put in the new sewer system, and I mean, in order to get something new, it would have to be expanded again. Well, that's, it's a different chapter.
And to get that hookup, the only other, I mean, in the northern area up there.
That's
but
Grand Blanc maybe,
that's
and there again,
Grand
that's
Blanc,
gonna be the
that's-
argument with them, correct?
That has nothing to do with here,
Right.
so.
I'd say, it's a pretty picture, but all the stuff out there, I mean, it's just this, there's no facilities available, any of that.
So I think I see what you're getting at, absolutely. And I think one thing to remember is that in the neighborhood residential, the standard permitted minimum, these are also minimums, density is 1 unit per acre. So most often, development that you see is gonna be just the standard permitted by right type of development. And in those yellow areas, that's 1 unit per acre. And, with a future land use plan, you don't wanna have 30 different categories, right? And even though we're looking at these areas near the village that perhaps could have a higher density, we're leaving room for that if that should be sought after by a developer, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna happen because, like you said, if there aren't the facilities there and if it would be an obscene cost to make that happen, then it just won't happen, right? But we wanna allow for some additional housing options. So going back to what we've been talking about, which is, young families, folks that maybe are teachers or, can't afford a 10-acre lot, if there are folks like that that wanna move to the township, and there's a developer that can provide that type of housing, something that is on a smaller lot, then this is just saying, well, it can happen, but they're gonna need to provide sufficient facilities. And anything that is developed in the township, especially if it's not the standard type, would have to go through a rigorous review process to make sure that they're meeting all of your standards, all of the fire standards, engineering standards, and nothing would ever get approved or built if it doesn't, have sufficient facilities or, part of that review process, which, this commission hasn't had many site plans come through in the last, couple of months, but part of that is looking at traffic. Sometimes we will require a traffic study to be done, or, all of these things, and you don't have to approve something that is beyond the standard unless you feel very satisfied that not only they're meeting the ordinances, but once you get beyond the standard permitted type of development, you have something like with special land use, for example, they have to meet additional standards, and it's the same for a cluster or transfer development option. And like I said, this transfer development option is not even in the ordinance yet, and over the next couple of years, once the township gets to the point where they're ready to do a zoning update, the standards that they have to meet to even be able to get that density are for all of us to define, for you to define, for the residents to define. So I don't want it to scare you or make it seem like, well, how are they gonna get it there? Well, if they want to build to that density, then that's something that they have to present to us and propose to us to say, we wanna have this many units, here's how we're gonna get them water, here's how we're going to landscape it, and meet all of your requirements. So I think that some of these higher density options are in there and really speaking to this area to the west of the village. Even though they also apply to this area, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen there. And again, we don't want to have so many different categories, and even though this standard type of development might make sense in that northern part, that doesn't mean that the cluster or transfer is going to make perfect sense there, and because of that, then it probably just will never happen. No one's going to propose something like that there. But we do want to see the 1 unit per acre in this area, which is the standard, and we also would like to see that over in these yellow areas. And if someone wants to come and propose something beyond that, then they have to meet these extra standards. And again, if they're trying to offer these additional options, it's gonna provide something different that's not currently available in the township, and that can meet a lot of your other goals, like having more affordable housing and having just a diversity of housing options.
So we look at the transfer, sending and receiving, and I understand we want to allow some other housing options in the township for people that want a smaller home. They don't want 2.5 or 5 acres or whatever. And currently right now, Silverman, they brought several different options to us in that area there. They can develop. We've looked at options where we are considering what could we allow them to put as far as other homes. But when I look at that other area all down here, even though it was stated before there was still room for a lot of development in there, I don't know where else you would put anything else in that area that we're calling to be a receiving zone.
They're already relatively small parcels, already have buildings on them in most cases. I think your point isn't it? It's already somewhat developed.
Yeah, I would totally agree.
I think that should be taken out of the receiving zone. I think that
I think that's raised position a little bit,
develop
it's
under the standards we have, but And that's been my problem all along, is where else are you talking? Because you've got your area, which down there, that's all residential, what else are you gonna squeeze in there? It just doesn't make sense to me.
The only place possibly is the further north part,
Yeah,
there's a
yeah,
couple places up there that might be a little bit more
up here.
space, but
If you pull,
Around
can you
the
pull
village.
the map down, down the other way?
Oh, this way?
Yeah, down the other way. I mean, you've got
potentially bigger
obviously
parcels up
in
there
here,
that.
up in there, and maybe even possibly up in the northern area, you go across Evans Road or up in there, at some point, you can see you're right up next to Grand Blanc, you've got a tremendous amount of commercial stuff, you've got hospitals, you've got a lot of other stuff in there. So to me, if you're looking at expanding somewhere, what are you talking about, 5 years or 10 years? That to me is your logical area. So
Well-
that's.
Not me.
Struggle with this, so.
So,
That's it.
like Karen mentioned, this is, you know, the current plan back from 2016 was called the Holly Township 2040 plan. So even, you know, several years ago, we're looking
Right.
decades in the future. And I would say the same goes for this. With what is in this current receiving zone, by no means are we saying that everything's gonna get demolished and we're gonna put, you know, all these different densities that are in here. The idea is that the areas that, like you said, are larger parcels or do have room for different development is that we're gonna allow those folks in the future to do something like that. And like I was saying before, all of this is very long-range incremental, so, you know, the ideas that we're talking about in this plan may not come to fruition for, like you said, another 10 years. But the idea is that we're looking towards the future and saying, you know, we really like how things are for now, but in these areas that may have larger parcels, then we want to allow for some more neighborhoods or for some different options, like a townhome, which is maybe where Riverside, that specific area might come in.
So- Can you, because Riverside, you know, we're looking at it with the overlay district where they can develop under added standards, added homes. So could you designate some of those areas and put an overlay district, call it an overlay district rather than a sending zone or a receiving zone?
Yes, so the way that,
And you would have to come back to us under those standards, under the overlay district.
so the regulating plan that we've been discussing, that's essentially what it's going to be, is an overlay district. So any of the areas designated as red, so down here, and then this little area, off of Dixie up here, the regulating plan essentially is an overlay to say that even beyond what is in the zoning ordinance for the entire township, those specific red areas will have even more detailed standards that they have to meet. And if you remember back when we had a map of just that rural town center area, we had shown where they might do the lowest density versus, you know, as you get closer, you can put maybe a little bit higher density. So, you know, with these future land use categories, the other thing is that none of these densities are applicable, again, until we update that zoning ordinance. Anything that, when you go to update the zoning ordinance, you kind of have to back yourself up by, well, we said this is what we want in the master plan. With the densities that are in this table, for example, these are gonna apply all across the township in these designated areas. But then that regulating plan is gonna get even more detailed, not looking at the parcel level, but looking at, well, this part of the parcel, we want this density, and this part of the parcel, we want this density. And even beyond that, with the regulating plan, we talked about, we want to require a certain amount of open space and green space and something like a plaza, for example. And that regulating plan is gonna give you a lot more power over what that ends up looking like. But again, I don't want you all to get nervous about, well, where are we gonna put anything with how things are currently laid out? If everything stays exactly the same as it is now, then that's fine. But what this is saying is if they wanted to add on to their home, or if there's an empty parcel and they wanted to add additional units that maybe right now we don't see in the township, then it would allow them. And, you know, that's not to say that everyone has to do it. It's just saying that they could if they wanted to, you know.
So the regulating plan we're looking at is basically what would be our options, what we would consider in the areas that are marked as receiving zones.
Nope, the regulating plan is just the rural town center, so.
Just the rural town center.
Yep.
And so that was my,
That was
cause
one of my twos.
Cause my concern isn't really north of, Tinsman, like that's all mainly the larger lots and stuff, but like
Mhm.
these yellow areas, like north of Quick and south of Grange Hall that already have development and stuff, there are still areas there.
Mhm.
And so that's where my concern mainly was, and
Mhm.
even over here, east of Bush Lake, just to, if those are, I don't know if that's a receiving zone.
It is not.
Okay,
It
so
is
like
not.
this area over here, we've already got a lot of concerns over months from public and us about traffic density in the rural town center. We're getting that squared away, we're gonna have a regulating plan that will be taken care of as best we can. But then we get into these other areas that really aren't far from that water system. Or already have to have some sort of water. I mean, there's gotta be, for the subdivisions that are there around Academy and stuff, like,
Maybe part of the original agreement, yeah, they're supposed to have sewer water.
so then,
But
but
there's
then
nothing
that.
left, there's no space left there, those are filled up.
The green, the area here,
But the green wouldn't have sewer.
I mean, is that whole area fairly well built out now with houses, or is a lot of it vacant?
Well, it's all built, and then you like,
That's built
I
up.
think Whistle Stop that cuts back in there, those are all lots of houses on them.
And
Canter Road's all built, I mean,
And it's hard to see, you see, you
Yeah,
know, as
no,
far
no,
as.
There's
They're
some
still
squares,
building houses
yeah.
over there. If you drive back there, there's some brand new houses, there's lots still for sale, so.
but basically the lot lines you see there are pretty well lots that
They're pretty
they're
well lots.
built.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These
So
are
they're
all the
pretty well
current
lots,
parcel
but
lines.
are they lots, or I look at it as an area, you're not gonna have a developer come in and say, okay, I'm gonna chop this
No,
all
I
up.
mean,
and
there's
I'm
already
gonna-"
houses there, yeah, you can't,
So
there's
what
no,
else are you
I've
adding?
touched on art, the receiving zone, it's like, the only one that really applies is, you see, up there on Fish Lake and Quick Road, that's really what we're talking about.
Up at
The
top.
rest of the stuff, I don't see where there's
I
receiving
mean,
from,
right in here, but that's
There's-
Riverside South, and that's pretty well,
that's pretty well built,
it's all built out.
I would agree.
So another thing, as we're talking about this to note, is that when we get to our second agenda item, the schedule, the proposed amendment, the reason that we have that issue there is because over in the Great Lakes subdivision area, what happened is that a lot of these parcels were platted before any of the current zoning ordinance regulations were in place, and that created a lot of non-conforming lots. So, you know, one of the main focuses of this process is to think into the future what new things might be built, but also we want to make sure that it matches the existing characters. So if we're looking at this receiving zone, and you know, we keep talking about what's already there, if we look at the standard development densities for the low density residential, that's 1 unit per 5 acres. And that's, you know, in line with what's there. And that's what we want, because we don't want to have non-conforming lots and parcels, because it makes it very difficult in the future if they want to do any changes that might trigger a zoning review. We'll say, well, it's a non-conforming lot, you know, that has its own kind of set of issues. And so, you know, again, the cluster and transfer development options are there for those areas that still are not yet built out. And the standard is really what, on an average property, we want to see, and also what's already there. And so, does that make sense?
I guess if we look at the draft of the master plan and it comes to us as this way, and we have certain questions. But then when we move forward into doing the new concept plan for it, or
The
regulation,
Yep.
I get that in my mind, the regulation plan.
Yep.
Then we can change what we think we want, say, in that area there through that.
So in the current draft, the only area that the regulating plan will speak to is these red parcels. So this is the rural town center area.
Okay.
So that does not cover the entire receiving area, it's just the ones that are rural town center. And so, you know, that's an area where obviously, we already have a developer that is, you know, interested in it. It's an area that doesn't have a lot of structures on it currently. So it's an area that is very likely to change in the near future. Whereas these other areas in the receiving zone, they already have things on them, so they're not likely to change in the next 5 to 10 years.
So then again, makes a little more sense. I mean, you have the other areas, somebody wants to come in and develop it further or do other building, they're gonna have to meet, if they were to have a lot, be able to divide it, to have the correct road frontage, be able to have Oakland County septic and meet water regulations and whatever else. If they don't meet any of that, then of course they can't. So it's up to them to have to.
I think the point is that whole receiving zone makes no sense because
Makes no sense.
it's just like a waste of time, and it makes you think that if you own parcels there, that all of a sudden you can do
Yes.
more, but in fact, you really can't.
Yeah.
It just seems like it's a meaning, I think what Ray was getting to, it's kind of a meaningless thing that for almost all the areas, we can put receiving zone around the building, you know?
There's a couple large parcels in there, and if somebody wanted, the developer wants to come in and buy all the homes and then put half acre homes on it, they can do that. So there are options there, whether you can see them or not. There are future options for
And then just that large chunk north of Quick Road, you know, it's really not far from the Riverside and the current, Mill Point that have the water and stuff there. Like, I really don't think it'd be far for someone to.
That's, again, it's a whole new thing, the village doesn't have capacity, well, it's a big deal. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, it's just.
If I little, we all talk to developers, we're not talking about individual people who wants to buy a house, build a house or something. And we talk about it for developers, and I know we have to protect ourselves against things for developers, but I see most of Holly Township being built up as individual homes, but.
Well, the sizing and stuff for what's there, that I don't think is an issue for me. So, you know, an acre lot, I think that's perfectly appropriate.
Yeah.
But someone, if they get into it, and then there's that huge chunk about Quick for whatever reason goes, and then now it's, you can have point, you know, like the.
I don't have a zoning map, but
Well, right now,
Quick Road would probably be 5 acre lots, isn't it? Is that what the?
Not if that's a receiving zone.
Well, isn't the
though.
middle school, current middle school part of what's just above Quick Road? And that senior center that's there?
The middle school is the only thing that's in the village there. You remember, once you get past that, it's all town.
So I'm pulling up, this is the future land use map, but it's got the zoning boundaries overlaid, so, you'll see that there's a lot of different zoning districts within these different future land use categories. So part of, what might happen, or part of what happens during the zoning update, is changing districts. So again, you know, not to kind of go into a whole different conversation, but the current zoning is what is going to prevail here right now until any zoning changes happen. Now, with the zoning changes needing to align with the master plan, you know, if we come to discussions about the zoning ordinance and say, well, the densities that we have in this master plan aren't aligning with what we wanna see in the new zoning districts, should we kind of go through an update and make the changes so that this aligns better? We wanna feel like 99% sure about what's in the master plan, because that's kind of our justification for changing the zoning ordinance. And so, you know, in the plan, there's a page that shows the future land use categories and what current zoning districts those align with. And I know you may not all have the plan in front of you, but let's see.
Excuse me, can you tell us what SR stands for, please?
SR is single family residential zone. So, you know, in the plan, and this is in the future land use chapter, there's a page that's got the future land use category, the kind of proposed density that's been the topic tonight, and then the corresponding zoning district. Now, some of these either include multiple zoning districts, so if we want to make everything in the future land use plan come to life in the zoning ordinance, we would need to make some changes. But the idea is that we want to align with what's currently there and leave room if there is, you know, someone that wants to build something with a different type of option. But again, like Pam said, they would need to meet all the standards that the township lays out. So it's not just they can build as many homes as they want without any, you know, standards. But these are, and I know this is kind of a busy map, but it does show the current zoning districts versus the future land use categories.
So future land use shows, of course, the area where we're questioning now under R1, that they could build on a half-acre lot, which in that area would probably work without going to allowing a lesser or a smaller, lesser density, or greater density rather. So I say leave it as then the future land use map and don't make a change for that. That if no less than half an acre.
Well, it's 3-to-1 for receiving
I
zone
know.
right now, so that we
So-
would have to speak to change
So we
that,
have
so.
to change that.
And so, Mike, you quickly said let's change it or whatnot, we've had some discussion, what are
Yep,
your
go
thoughts?
for it.
So,
Around we go, but I think we all agree on that. We think that going to lesser.
Because I think it'll help with kind of that sprawling, more land outward feel
Yeah.
that we've talked about. And I don't
Yeah.
think it's that big of a change, and I'm talking going from, you know, 3-to-1 to 2-to-1. And I
Yeah.
think that's a substantial lot up there.
We're looking at this
Yes,
one.
up there, you've got the school, there's water, it wouldn't be difficult
Mm-hmm.
to, I think that's something to think about long term. And so, yes, all this down here in the other areas may already be developed, but we've already got concerns about the riverside and all that existing, and then that's even more that if possible, the residents of this area are not gonna wanna see piled lots, and that, you know, that school is gonna be used in the future,
It is.
you know, like it's,
Yeah.
you know, so it's gonna be desirable, and I think that having the larger lots just on the outside, sprawling outward, what we talked about, while also trying to limit it being so congested, I think that's, I'm not asking for to change it from 3 to 1 to 1, you know, like, but just to create a little more space. If my wife and I could get a half acre lot up in the township, oh man, we'd be thrilled. You know, so I think a lot of people, I think it'd still be good for a developer. Like, it's still inappropriate, there's a market for it, it fits our area, so that's my opinion.
And so, just so I make sure I've got this correct, we're looking at changing the neighborhood residential for the transfer development from 3 to 1 to the 2 to 1.
Correct. That's literally the only thing that I had a concern with.
And we're all feeling good about that?
So, you don't think anything's gonna happen there, so it shouldn't matter, right? Whether it's 2 to 1 or 3 to 1.
It'll be a whole new chapter if something does happen. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it is an issue, it's a concern. You already have a congested area.
Yeah.
I mean, you got through that section, there's really nowhere else. How are you going to widen? You can't take any more from Grange Hall Road. I mean, we need to.
I mean, they build a new gas station, they make it wider at my corner. They are there right now.
Yep.
Finally.
Just have to up
They've
and
been
move
going on
the
for 20 years of something like that.
Any other questions? Because I'm just trying to explain, you know, why this is the way it is, and, you know, with the boundaries and everything, a lot of this hasn't changed from the previous plan. The boundaries are the same, the parcels, like what designation each parcel is, we really have not changed from the previous plan. But I think what the biggest change has been since then is the current conditions. Like, we're seeing more traffic, we're seeing more development interest. But I just want to be clear that these have been sort of in Holly's plan for 8 years now. So it's not that we're trying to push any brand new ideas.
No.
I'm just trying to help you all understand.
No, I think you've done excellent, but I think for us here, it's just, kind of looking at receiving and sending, and what else are you going to, what else are we gonna do there to do it right, to allow it?
Yeah. Are there any other questions on the master plan? Because I want to make sure that we, talk about them tonight so we feel good about it at the public hearing next month.
That was my only thing.
As far as comments, that's probably the biggest thing is keeping rural lower, don't have high density any place kind of thing, I think was overall. Somewhat, it kind of seems selfish, but that's what people want in this area, so, and I think that's all the way through those comments, and I think you'll get that from talking to people now, obviously, that they don't want to be a downtown, the city kind of thing, so.
And that's why I was proud to see how we compare to our neighbors, and I mentioned that, we could, all the areas around us could have much more development, and then they're gonna cross and see, land when they come to Holly Township.
But with
and
the
that's,
township parks, the Great Lakes Cemetery,
Yeah.
we have a very, what looks like a lot of land, there isn't as much there available as
Yeah.
you'd think there was.
Yeah.
No, but we do have some beautiful still land
No?
going north, and, and I imagine that much of that vacant land or those larger parcels have been probably owned by a lot of those property owners for years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you, everyone. And thank you, I appreciate you.
Of course. I'm here to help
Taking the
as
barrage
best-
of questions,
as
yes.
best I can.
All right, so I think we're good with the master plan review, so that brings us to old business number 2, proposed code of ordinance amendment to chapter 32.
Yes. Okay, so in your packet, you've got a memo sort of describing why this is been brought to you. And the presentation tonight is very brief. I just wanted to kind of refresh. We talked about it last time, but so going back to all of this discussion around the zoning and non-conforming lots. So in this Great Lakes area specifically, this text amendment is really going to speak to that area because it's talking about lots of records. So existing historic lots that were kind of platted before these zoning regulations were in place. So if you're looking at someone that's going to seek to split their lot, for example, they have to comply with all of our current regulations when it comes to lot size, and that gets to what we were just talking about. Half acre, 1 acre, they all have different minimums for each zoning district. Now, this schedule of regulations, which has all of those regulations with size, has several footnotes, and the idea behind these footnotes is to provide relief to those historic lots that existed before all those standards were put in place. So we had some folks that wanted to build a home in the Great Lakes area, and because of these new standards, they had a non-conforming lot and they could not build their home unless they got a, they had to seek an appeal through the zoning board, and that meeting was held last month. Their appeal was approved, but the idea behind the zoning board of appeals is that if you have a well-functioning ordinance, you shouldn't really ever need anyone to have to go to the zoning board. These footnotes to the schedule of regulations provides several opportunities for folks with historic lots to build without needing to go to the zoning board. So in the current ordinance, which is all of the black text, we have a note in there that says that any non-conforming lot of record that has a non-conforming lot width or size, which many of those in the Great Lakes area have non-conforming sizes, they can have a smaller side yard setback. That's that footnote number 2. And then the third footnote, the current language states that they can have a front yard setback in single-family district that matches existing building patterns. The red text that you see here is what we're proposing to add, because the front and the side setbacks are addressed and they allow them to sort of match the existing building pattern. We're not giving them any special or overabundant special privileges over anyone else. It says that they must match the existing building patterns, but the rear yard was just not addressed in this ordinance, and so that became an issue for this specific family that wanted to build a home. They ended up getting their zoning appeal approved, but we don't want everyone to have to do that. And so we're just proposing that rear yard is also included in this footnote so that we're addressing all sides of a potential structure. And this is also only in single family districts. So in the memo, I included the current standards for the single SR district. But these footnotes apply to any single family districts, but no other districts. And it's only for these historic lots of record, which really only exist and have these non-conforming lots in the Great Lakes area. And so, you know, this was the site that we looked at the zoning board. You know, just thought I would include that for reference, but I wanted to also kind of highlight that in doing this and approving this amendment, we're allowing folks to build in the same character that exists in the Great Lakes neighborhood right now, and that is included in the master plan is, you know, kind of a focus on this area and wanting to maintain the existing up north character. It literally says up north character, and approving this amendment would allow for that. So, do you guys have any questions about this?
I think it's what we talked about the last meeting for those property owners in that small area, to be able to use their parcels essentially. So, I don't have any questions or any changes. Are we do we take any action to approve the amendment, or is that for? Okay, sure, if you,
I will make a motion to approve the amendment to chapter 32, zoning article 3, zoning district regulations, section 32-104 of the schedule of regulations, to amend number 3 to include front and rear yard setbacks in the single family district, and a minimum front and rear yard setbacks shall be based on the established residential patterns of the ERBP. I don't know if we want to, I guess you could put the whole wording out, or the minimum setback specified in schedule regulations, whichever is less.
perfect.
I'll second that.
We have motion and support. I believe we need a roll call vote for that.
You need a roll call. No.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Wonderful.
I would like to just add one little thing on that. In the master plan, under this area where you have, you know, the Great Lakes community, I think a little wording could be included or changed in there.
Okay.
Because at the zoning board of appeals, it was designated that this area was a historical district because those platted lots were platted 1938 before the original ordinance. And that because it is in the historical district, for those lots that it would still maintain the rural character for the lakefronts, for the wooded lots, and for the nonconformity. Just because that really is the only section we have where we refer to it. We had quite a discussion at that at the Board of Zoning Appeals about it being historical. So I think just maybe a few little words, a little change up in here. I tried to write it out and I got too wordy. It just seemed like now all of a sudden it was a page, and really all we want to say is that it is the historical district basically, because they were platted in 1938 before the original ordinance.
Sure. Yeah, and I guess just to clarify, it's, you know, they have historic districts that, a true historic designation from the state brings in a whole other host of like standards and regulations. That area is not a historic district. It's just that the parcel and lot lines are considered historic lots of record. So, but
And
I
that
can
might be the
definitely
way to
include
word.
that.
They are historical lots of record for us because
Yes.
they were platted in 1938 before we approved our
Correct.
ordinance.
Yes, so I'll add a note and say that, you know, this area has, yes, we will absolutely add
We
it.
don't want somebody to think they have to build according to historic standards.
Yes, yes, I just wanted to
Yeah, you're
make
right.
sure we're all, you know, I don't wanna mislead anybody, so.
Well, very good. No new business, reports. Anyone have anything to report? Just want to say, next month and going forward, our meetings will be on Wednesdays at the Old Township office downtown, correct?
Second Wednesday.
Second Wednesday, yes, not every Wednesday. So if nothing else, that brings us to our final public comment. As mentioned earlier, each member will have 3 minutes. If approved by us, you can be allotted an additional 3 minutes. Your time will begin after you state your name and address. And this is for any and all items, not just agenda items. So anyone for public comment?
Mark Mandruski, I'm not used to sitting down. 2105 Middle Ridge Drive, located in Township. First, the comment I'd like to make is I'd like to thank the board for, you know, all of the discussion you had about our comments and our feelings and the time that a lot of people have put over the past couple of years. It restores faith that, yes, our voice is listened to, you know, at least listened to and acted upon. Since 2021, Silverman has been pitching conceptual drawings for expanding off into the rural town center area and so on, but has consistently said he's washed, you know, his hands were washed, he sold that development, it wasn't his issue, and so on. It was awful convenient at that point to do it. Over the years, I've questioned multiple times at length to what was our common areas of Riverside. It took, and I'm gonna say it took probably over a year to get confirmation that the common areas coming off Grange Hall, all the way running along the school, and the areas out in front of my house, over the gas line, and down the center, which was marketed as our park. Not this pipe dream of it's an open space. It was marketed as the park. It took a long time to finally get it admitted that yes, that was 5A, yes, that was our development, yes, that was owned by the HOA. Towards the tail end of last summer, when Silverman brought his conceptual drawings, it finally came out that they admitted that those parcels hadn't been deeded over. So then again, I started questioning the township. Who owns it? Who owns it? When's it getting done? And I've received several different answers, and I'm not going to say the township hasn't provided answers, but in the beginning it's like, yes, we're looking into it. Well, this past week I was like, what is going on? And I was basically led with, I'm not going to talk about this anymore. It's going to be turned over to the attorney. We'll have to do it, and that'll be all it is. Well, to find out when something is transferred in a title, I can go buy a house, go to you know, closing, and within days they can do the title work search and figure it out. Now, am I saying I should get an answer in days? No, but oh my goodness, since 2021, we can't figure out that this slippery person has not transferred the paperwork over, and we've done nothing about it. Do we not have an attorney in the township that can get this done? Now, granted, I understand the village had to chase some states away and try to find process servers just to try to collect on the money owed for the taps, but when are we going to learn with our business dealings with Silverman that nothing is at face value? Everything is in the background with him. It's very disturbing because we keep bringing it up, and it's not just one thing, it's a common thing. At bare minimum, I would call it sloppy follow through with making sure. At the worst end of it, it's concerning that everyone is in the dark that he never transferred the property over, and we still can't get a confirmation of when that's going to happen. I guess I would just implore that it seems like you have very reasonable expectations and thoughts about what the public thinks about development and developers, and you know, I don't hide my feelings for them, because the more I dig into them, the absolute more disgusted I am with what he does to communities and people. But I would beg you to keep looking at that. You know, we're dealing with security bonds that were based on 2005, and no one thought it would go on this long. Well, yeah, that should be something that the multiplying factor shouldn't be maybe 0.25 added to, you know, what today's value is, because he's proven the fact that it could go 20 years. Absolutely. And then he leaves town, and we're left with it. And it's just not acceptable to me. It just is not. I don't think we should give him any more rope to hang. I think if he wants to get in here and do it, he should have astronomical, huge hurdles to climb. Not to mention whatever sweet deal they worked out for his partial payments for the water and sewer tax. I think that he should absolutely be held accountable, and the deal should be off, and whatever he originally owed, he should have to pay. You know, this is our community. It's not his community. We live here. We pay the taxes. A lot of us put in time to come here and tell you how we feel. I do love the area. I just don't love when it's being exploited, and when we can't get the information that we're entitled to by our elected and appointed officials. I think it's disrespectful, and I think it's unexcusable. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Yes?
Angela Corliss, 3086 Quick Road. I, like you guys, went through the public comments from the original before we had the, you've got 63 days to comment now. And when I was going through it, I noticed that the word development, overdevelopment, and developer are used 91 times in the comments. 37 times if you take out the comments from the person you deemed blue comments. So that's still quite a few. And out of all of those times, it was used in positive reference 5 or 6 times. Those were development of public parks and trails, economic development of downtown, downtown development, and development opportunities. Everything else was development is bad. We even had one that said development of outdoor retail, outdoor tourism, market, etc. Take the emphasis off of everything being historic. So new things. So that makes any word with the word development, or any word with the word develop in it, being positive 6.8% of the time. Rural is mentioned 36 times. Not once does it say, I wish it was less. It was used negative once or twice for 2.7% of the time. In closing, the greatest strength of Holly section says things like plenty of green spaces, not crowded, preservation of beauty of the lakes, streams, and nature and not an overabundance of subdivisions. They listen to the communities, the board's willingness to listen to their constituents. I think that when it comes to the master plan, you really need to listen to what everybody keeps saying, time and time again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Yes.
Yeah, my name is Norm Koski, 2167 Hidden Ridge. I spoke several times here, and I'm just curious if the plans that have been resubmitted, have we gotten out to this 50 by 130 foot lot concept? I just am really puzzled that we want to stack houses in beautiful areas like that. It's an absolute travesty to do that. And at the end of the day, this doesn't have to be a losing proposition for you guys. I shared context on my thoughts on that last time I was here, and I'm just curious, have they provided anything new for that area?
So I'm stopping your time. Typically, public comment is not a back and forth questionnaire. We may not have the ability to answer your question, but we'll take note of it, and at our next meeting, we'll address those things.
Basically, I'm just wondering, have they responded to the documents that I shared with you guys last time? That's it. So.
We don't have an answer, we can't answer.
Oh, no, that's the
We'd be
question.
delivering to McKenna as the developer, and we don't have constant feedback from them, so we don't know.
Well, that's what I was
And I just
wondering.
want to clarify, we're not the developer.
Well, I
We're
mean,
the
you're
township planner, so
the planners, right, so
yeah,
they're interacting
so-
with them, and they're
Yeah,
negotiating,
Oh,
having
I should ask
meetings,
the young lady.
and then when they get a proposal ready, they bring it to us and we take a look at it. So we're not constantly in contact with Silverman and discussing what his plans are.
No, that's what I was asking. Has he sent a revision?
I don't know, I haven't seen one, not since the last time he was here.
Okay. Karen, by chance, have you gotten anything? Okay, all right. That's the answer. Thank you.
Yeah, it would be nice to see something, but we don't have it.
Anyone else
That's
for
my
public
comment.
comment?
Cool, thank you.
All right, hearing none, seeing none. Thank you all for your time, and look forward to seeing you next month. We'll move to adjourn at 8:10 p.m.